Hey everyone, how's it going? So one thing really cool and I think pretty unique about the Pokemon series is that you can play the games in so many different ways, which appeals to a lot of different people. For example, a lot of people just play the single player game and that's fine. Some people want to catch them all. I mean, if you grew up in the late 90s, that's all you heard on TV. So, of course, a lot of us would try and do that, and that's difficult, but not impossible. You can also go for a shiny hunt, and I've made a few videos to try and help people with that. That can be tedious, but if you have the patience for it, it can be really rewarding. And you can also competitively battle your Pokemon, which is probably what I'm most interested in right now. However, there is a fifth way you can play the Pokemon games that I have not talked about really yet, and that is what I'm going to be talking about in this video. And as you can tell by the title, that is Pokemon speedrunning. So in case you've never heard of speedrunning before, it's exactly what it sounds like, playing through the game as quick as you can. Usually each game will have different categories which have their own rules, but in general, save states aren't allowed, cheating devices aren't allowed, so stuff like that. But glitches are usually allowed depending on the category. Emulators are sometimes allowed if it emulates the game properly. And that's pretty much all the general rules to speedrunning. The rest are on a game-by-game basis. Now, you might not think of an RPG like Pokemon as a great game for speedrunning, but it still has a pretty sizable community. It currently ranks 15th on speedruns.com with about 400 lifetime runners, which is about a quarter of the #1 spot Mario 64. For those of you who are sort of aware of speedruns, yes, usually it's more action-focused games that are speedrun, but Pokemon and Red and Blue are still really interesting speedruns to watch, especially if you're into the Pokemon games. Now, in my opinion, the thing that sets Pokemon and other RPG speedruns apart from the regular sort of action games is that action games come down to execution at the end of the day. Sure, there's routing, that's important, and of course there are going to be elements of luck in pretty much every game, but realistically, 90% of the run is how well the runner executes, how well they make their jumps, how well that they make the wall kicks, etc. In Pokemon, execution still matters. How you move throughout the map and making sure you get through menus quickly is very, very important. But I would say the vast majority of the run comes down to routing, which is how you're going to go through the game in the most efficient manner, and a bit of luck. Now that can be sort of bad, annoying luck, like getting too many Pokemon encounters which slows you down, but it can also be somewhat interesting luck in that a runner needs to know how to react to a variety of situations. Thus, I find that no two Pokemon speedruns are exactly alike, and I can't really say the same thing from my perspective of a lot of the action games. In an ideal world, every Mario 64 run should be the same, with the exception of improvements, while Pokemon, you're always going to get a crit that you didn't expect, maybe a freeze hacks, something like that, and knowing how to deal with that is what really sets apart the good runners and the great runners. I mean, I've actually learned more about the inner workings of Red and Blue from watching speedruns than from almost 15 years of playing the games and looking them up online on conventional sites like Bulbapedia. So now you might be wondering, how long does it take to speedrun through Pokemon Red and Blue? Well, that's actually a pretty complicated answer, and truthfully, it depends on what you mean by that. Most games generally will have two main categories for speedrunning. One of them is called any percent, and this is kind of the truest speedrun in a sense. This is getting through the game as quick as possible, utilizing every exploit and glitch you can. Now, this can cut down a lot of the game. For example, Ocarina of Time, a game that took most of us casually probably 10 to 20 hours, can be beaten in 17 minutes and 9 seconds by exploiting a bunch of glitches. Now, for a lot of people, this feels kind of cheap. Like, you're not really playing Ocarina of Time at this point, you're playing just a small section of it. So a lot of games, including Ocarina of Time, have an 100% category. That usually means completing all objectives, doing the quests, etc. And amazingly, this can be done in under 4.5 hours. And that's crazy for those of us who have played the game casually. Now, if you've gone to speedruns.com, you might notice that Pokemon actually doesn't have either any percent or 100%. And I'm going to talk about why right now. You see, the true any percent category for Pokemon would be completely pointless, and I'm actually going to do a mini Let's Play for you right now of a true any percent Pokemon run. Okay, so this run is completely crazy, and a lot of things happen in just like 2 minutes, usually less, but I took a little bit longer. So I hope you bear with me, and maybe I'll do another video just on all the glitches, and I have actually talked about a lot of these in other videos. But anyway, the beginning is pretty normal. You just need to select a name for you and your rival and scroll through this text as fast as possible. The name you pick for yourself doesn't matter. Yellow is the easiest on yellow because it's the first name and it takes the least amount of time. For your rival, on yellow, you actually want to do Gary rather than blue. On red and blue, it doesn't matter. The reason for this is a glitch we're going to do that allows us to get to the Hall of Fame relies on what your rival's name is, and if it's blue in yellow, it will be a little trickier, but not impossible. Anyway, all you need to do when you get control of your character is go to save, and then just turn off your game while it's saving at the precise frame. This was not correct. Basically, the moment you're looking for is when that text box with yes and no closes, and before the saving or now saving text appears. It is like a frame-perfect trick. It takes you forever. If you do it too early, the game won't save. You do it too late, the game saves normally. You do it just wrong, then the save file is corrupted beyond repair. But if you do it just right, it'll look like you have a Pokemon that is poisoned when you walk around. And when you go into your Pokemon menu, which you shouldn't be able to do, you can actually scroll beyond the 6 Pokemon spots you should have, and you can swap 2 and 11, and then 9 and 10. And that actually enables item underflow, which I've explained in other videos, but all you need to know is that it basically lets your items menu act as a mini ROM editor, and we're going to tell the game to make this door we're about to go through take us to the Hall of Fame. Now, this item, WM, corresponds to your rival's name, and I'm switching with Master Ball 0, which is the exit pointer. 0 means Pallet Town, but unfortunately, well, that was a key item because I picked blue. So I couldn't toss 68, which would have sent me to the Hall of Fame. So instead, I got creative and I switched it with Ultra Ball 0. Ultra Ball 0, or sometimes it's something else 0, but usually Ultra Ball 0 represents brightness. So if you swap around the wrong item, like Great Ball 0 or something, you'll crash your game or you can't go through the door, something wacky will happen. But I knew that Ultra Ball 0 corresponded to brightness. The only thing is, now instead of 68 items, I have to toss 138 and deal with these glitchy numbers. So that's a little annoying. But once I get this all to work out and I toss 138, all I have to do is walk through the door and bam! Hall of Fame in under 3 minutes. It really is that easy, although fair warning, it took me 45 minutes to get that frame-perfect turning off while saving glitch to work out. But yeah, 2 minutes and 35 seconds, not bad for my first try ever. So the unofficial world record, because this isn't a recognized category, is about 1:20 or so. And that's really impressive, but I think you can see how silly this category would be. It's just simply not long enough, and the world record would end up coming down to milliseconds. Additionally, for the longest time, Pokemon actually went by in-game time rather than real time, and although I got a 001, many people can easily get a 000 with enough practice, and so keeping track of who had the world record would be completely pointless. So the community got together and decided, alright, this glitch, which is called save corruption, shouldn't be allowed, but if we didn't use it, how fast can we complete Pokemon? This brings us to the first official category we're going to talk about, any % no save corruption, and this category has changed a lot since I first found out about it. Back then, it took around 18 to 20 minutes. In fact, IGN has a really popular video bragging about how you can beat Pokemon in under 25. But now, the world record is almost half that, 12 minutes, 59 seconds, which is absolutely insane. Now, unfortunately, I won't be able to produce my own video content, so I'm going to be showing off some excellent runs from some of the runners on speedruns.com. I can't show much of their runs for fair use purposes, but I really suggest that if you're interested, you check some of these runs out, because they're very, very entertaining. Anyway, let's get to it. So you actually are going to do a really hard trick right at the beginning, and that's manipulating your trainer ID. When the start screen appears, essentially you have to hold buttons in a very specific order for very specific periods of time, and if you do so, you will somehow manipulate your trainer ID. I will link a video if you're interested in how to do this, but I could not figure out how to do it. I guess I got the timing wrong. I've been told it is a little difficult. Anyway, other than that, the run is actually quite normal for the first little bit. You need to name yourself 5 commas to set up a glitch at the end of the run, and your rival just a name of one character to make it faster. Alright, next you have to pick your starter Pokemon, and you need to pick Bulbasaur, although apparently you can pick Charmander. That's how the new world record was achieved, and that came out about a week ago from the time of this recording, but I have no idea how this was done, and since I can't understand it, I'm going to just talk about Bulbasaur, because this has been the strategy for years now. Now, while I don't fully understand why this works, I do know that the glitch we're about to pull off in Pewter City does require us to have a Bulbasaur that either has exactly 16 special, in addition to catching a Pidgey with certain HP values in our party, or by having a Bulbasaur whose PP is Leech Seed doesn't matter, followed by Tackle with 16, and Growl with 36. Again, don't know exactly why this works, but it will every time. The glitch I'm talking about is called Brock Through Walls, and the way it works is pretty neat. I've talked about it in other videos, but might as well talk about it here, because it's pretty much what sets up the rest of this run. First, we're actually going to do another glitch called Brock Skip, which lets us bypass that youngster who's supposed to take us to Brock's gym. Essentially, if you mash B out of his text box, there's a few frame windows where you can actually press start. While you won't be able to move your cursor, in Pokemon Red and Blue, if you already had your cursor on save, you can actually save the game and reset. When you load up the game, you'll be far enough away that the youngster will no longer try and take you to Brock's gym, and you can just walk to the rest of the game. Pretty cool, right? But we're about to do something even more neat. You see, the game never anticipates that you can talk to that guy from the right. Now, ordinarily, the game tries to look up a value in order to make sure that that youngster always takes you right into Brock's gym. But when you talk from the right, the game freaks out and for whatever reason looks in your Pokemon menu, and if you have that very specific Bulbasaur and or Pidgey, the game will allow you to walk through walls, and this is where the run gets really crazy. You can actually manipulate the map by walking a little bit to the side and then up. The reason for this is that the map doesn't anticipate you being able to come from that direction and doesn't load properly. And by walking in a very specific path, you can get yourself to Cerulean Cave, where the hardest part of this run is about to occur. Now, remember how right at the beginning I talked about manipulating for your trainer ID? Well, now you're about to manipulate a Ditto encounter, and I think to be able to catch the Ditto with one Pokeball. Now, to me, this is brand new. I actually didn't know about this strategy until I started looking up this video, and it looks really cool, but man, do I not understand how this works at all. Just know it does, and if you're practiced and do everything right, you will get a Ditto at the same frame every time, and you will catch it in a single Pokeball. You can then use an escape rope you should have bought earlier, and go back to Pallet Town. Okay, this is where the run actually just is insane, and I understand very little, so I'm just going to tell you what's going on, but don't get me to explain it. Hopefully some speedrunner watches this video and clears a lot of this up for me, because it's just crazy. I do know that there is a glitch you can use by having Ditto transform and swapping their moves around, and that's the first glitch you're going to pull off. Once you've done that, you have to get an encounter on a very specific tile, and then catch the Pokemon that is some glitchy mess by looking at Ditto's moves, having the move kind of go crazy, commas are everywhere, it's just, well, you can see for yourself. Once you catch Rhydon, apparently, you're then going to try and get into another encounter, but the encounter will be all glitchy. Once again, you're going to press down to make your moves change and go nuts, and you'll catch this glitchy mess, and this glitchy mess allows you to use your Pokemon menu like we did in the theoretical any % category as a ROM editor. By swapping certain slots around, you're actually able to go right into the Hall of Fame. However, if you didn't manipulate your trainer ID, it won't work. And that's why all of this is so important. Now, I think you can probably see why this run is a lot more interesting to speedrunners and viewers than our theoretical any % run. For one, it's a lot longer and there's a lot more skill. And secondly, there's a lot more going on. This run's about 9 months old, I think, and it replaced another run that had been, optimized for years. Runners are constantly finding new glitches and new ways of doing the run, and that's what makes the category really entertaining. However, I do know a good number of people who would hear this and say, well, J-Rose, I think this is all neat and all, but this really isn't a Pokemon speedrun. It's more like a Pokemon glitch run. You're really not playing the game anymore. You're basically just glitching left and right, doing all this crazy stuff. Isn't there anyone who just plays through Pokemon normally and sees who can do it fastest? Well, there is, and actually that is probably the most popular category of Red and Blue, and it's called any % glitchless, and it's what we're going to be talking about right now. Now, I'm not going to go into as much detail for this category as the others, because there's not as much to explain in a sense. Because it's glitchless, it is exactly what you think it is. It's playing the game really well, doing an optimal route, trying to avoid as many encounters, making sure your paths are always correct. There's also some, cool strategies like using Nidoking, because Nidoking is actually faster. The run used to use Squirtle, which evolved into Blastoise, but they found out that Nidoking not only is more consistent, but is actually faster, which is pretty neat. I wouldn't have thought that. Another thing that's really cool that you might not have known is when you were a kid and the red bar noise or the alert noise when you're at low health is playing, you might have noticed that things seem to happen a little bit quicker. Well, this is completely true, and speedrunners will try and be in red bar as much as they possibly can in order to save those precious seconds or minutes. Finally, another thing you might not know is that if you use X accuracy, unlike in other generations where it just makes your accuracy a little bit higher, in Gen 1, it makes every move basically act like Swift and never miss. So a lot of the run is just spamming Horn Drill with your Nidoking. It's really, really funny, but also requires very, very planned out and well executed battles where if something goes wrong, a runner really has to trust that they're able to get out of it and have enough tools to do so, because it really is just you and your Nidoking against the game. But yeah, this is a glitchless run, so you're going to be going through the entire game. It's really cool. The only exception is you can use a Pokédoll on Marowak and skip the Rocket Corner. So I guess that might be considered, a glitch, but they don't. But yeah, I'm going to put a few videos in the description. This run was showed off at GDQ. I believe it was yellow, but a GDQ run is always really fun to watch. The new strategy for any % no save corruption hasn't been shown off at GDQ as far as I know, but there has been any % glitchless pretty recently. And the reason why they're so good is because GDQ runs are generally meant for people who haven't seen a Pokemon speedrun before, so they explain everything they're doing, and it's truly fascinating how much these people know about the game and how well they've mastered a game that I thought I knew better than anyone else, but turns out I'm not even like a novice compared to them. Finally, what if you really like that slogan we heard as kids, gotta catch 'em all, yeah? So if that is something that really interested you, good news, there is a slightly smaller category, but still a competitive and interesting one called Catch 'em All. Right now, there are only 14 submitted runners, but it's been shown off at GDQ and I believe is the most popular video on the channel on YouTube. So you can check that run out. It's by Shenanagans, who is quite funny and he explains a lot of the glitches very well. I'm really not going to go into this run because this video is almost already 20 minutes, but it is a very glitch-heavy run. It's around 2 hours as well. I guess I should have said that any % glitchless and Catch 'em All are roughly the same time. So under 2 hours to beat Pokemon or catch every Pokemon, that is way shorter than you probably would have thought. But that concludes this video. I'm sure you're thinking, wait, J-Rose, there's a whole bunch of Pokemon games you didn't talk about. Maybe I'll talk about them in another video, but it's really important to know that Red and Blue by far have the biggest community of any Pokemon game. As for the rest of the games, funny enough, the rest of the main series Pokemon games combined almost have not as many runners as Red and Blue. So really, to talk about Pokemon speedrunning is to talk about Red and Blue, but at this year's Games Done Quick, they are going to be running Soul Silver. So if you guys like this video, let me know, and I'll make a sequel maybe, talking about the rest of them. But yeah, finally, I apologize if I got anything wrong. If you're a speedrunner and you watch this and I got something wrong, just let me know in the comment section. I tried to do my research as best as I could. I also tried to do the runs as best I could. I have a really horrible any % glitchless run I did, and I'm not going to be showing any of it because it's terrible. But yeah, I thought that the best way to explain stuff would be to try it myself. But man, some of those manipulations for any % no save corruption, I just can't do it. I don't know if it's just me or I'm not doing it right, but yeah. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Pokemon speedrunning is really interesting to me, and I'm always excited when something new happens and I watch a new run. It's not something I pay attention to every day, but it's really nice when you come back and you see new strategies. It's something I think is really fun. But yeah, this is almost 20 minutes, so I hope you enjoyed. Take care.